New Texans defensive end Danielle Hunter apparently dissed the Colts and chose the Texans. And the Texans are getting a lot of national love. Is there not enough pushback? And is it too much love for the Texans? Let's go inside the locker room.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the locker room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the post.
It is the locker room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 Central, Sports Radio 610 and the Odyssey app. Also see me on YouTube. Gonna be at Tom's Watch Bar tomorrow downtown from 10 to 2. If you want to come by, say hi. We'll make Lopez buy beers if you can get off, if you can come through 10 to 2. That's where we will be. We're going to touch on some news. It's kind of the quiet period right now for the offseason when it comes to the Texans. There was some news today. According to a report from ESPN, Danielle Hunter took less money to play for the Texans. He said no thank you to the Indianapolis Colts, who apparently offered more bread. What exactly do you make about this? What does it say about the Texans? Because I think there is some balance to this whole thing. On one hand, you'll say, it's a unique exception because, he is from here. He does have family from Houston. He's talked about it. So it's a different situation. And I would understand that. But I will say this. I think it does at least show that in the last couple of years, the Texans have gotten to a point where that's even possible. Because I don't care if Danielle Hunter had been from across NRG Stadium 2 years ago, 3 years ago, nobody's taking less money to play for the Texans. In fact, there was a Texans tax that we talked about where you would actually have to pay more to get a free agent. So I think that is I think that is something to make of it. I think the Texans are in a decent place. But as far as like the end all be all screw the Colts type of thing, I'm not quite there. I think the Colts missing out on Snead might actually be a blessing in disguise for them. I know that they were in with the Titans. I think it's good for the Texans because Snead's going to the Titans, who just don't really seem to have an identity. They're basically a restaurant. They're not even Cheesecake Factory. Don't give them that. But they're basically a restaurant that sells Mexican food, Chinese food, Italian food, seafood, American food, Thai food, salads, soups, desserts. They're basically that, and they ain't Cheesecake Factory. The Titans are a lost cause right now. They have no identity. No one should really take them serious. They don't know what they are. But what it says is basically that the Texans have come a decent way. Unique exception, but that's what I would put it. Other news for the Texans, the third phase, we talk about defense and offense. Neville Hewitt, who actually led the league in special teams tackles last year. Cal McNair once called him a tackling machine a couple of years ago. He's going to be back with the Texans. And it is, it's can be a small thing. It can be an under the radar type of thing. But the reality is the last 2 years, the Texans have had elite special teams. And the new kickoff role might make guys like Hewitt even more valuable. We're going to have to see what that impact is. But the special teams have been elite, and they bring back Neville Hewitt for those special teams. They've kind of taken care of that with paying Fairbairn, losing Johnston, but getting Townsend, who might be the same caliber of guy. Special teams, the third phase, which you don't know how bad it is till you don't have it. That's been the one thing that perhaps has been consistent the last few years when it comes to the Texans. They've had really, really good special teams. Shout out to friend of the show, Frank Ross, for that. It is the locker room. Subscribe, like, right along. A top source for Texans daily content. I'm Landry Locker here. I have a question, and this question emerged because I was watching Good Morning Football, and Peter Schrager and the co-hosts were talking about the Texans and how everyone seems to be high on them. And the overall theme from Kyle Brandt was that, if this were another show, when talking about how high people are in the Texans, I would have a counterpoint, but I don't have a counterpoint. He was basically saying that the Texans, there's nothing to not like about them, and the Texans are going to be eventually a threat to the Chiefs, and they're going to take the next step. And I do think eventually the Texans, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism there. No doubt. There's definitely a reason for optimism there when it comes to the Texans taking the next step. But we all know that in the NFL, whether it's stuff that's out of your control or stuff that's in your control, part of the reason that the NFL is so popular is because of the unpredictability. I mean, everybody was singing the praises of the Jags heading into last season, and the Jags kind of folded. So in the spirit of, just trying to figure out what the biggest obstacles are, I want to list the 5 biggest obstacles for the Houston Texans when it comes to taking the next step. And my thing is this. I said this earlier today. If the Texans let's say the Texans had lost to the Colts, and let's say that on that 4th down play, the Colts convert and the Colts end up ending the Texans season. I don't think heading into this year, you think much different. Now, it is nice to get the playoff experience. It is good to take the next step, but would I be sitting here saying, any less optimistic about the Texans if that had happened? Probably not. I would still have the same outlook, and they would still have the same opportunity. I don't think the sky would have fallen, but it was just, as simple as that one play. If the Texans next year, if they take a step back in the win column, but the young players continue to develop, does that mean that they regressed? Not necessarily, because the ultimate goal is to get to that Super Bowl. And sometimes stuff happens. Like, do the Bengals feel any worse about themselves now than they did last year when they get Burrow back? Or is the slate kind of wiped clean? I think that sometimes there's a tendency to overreact to certain results. And I think that's why in 2017, after the Jags made the AFC Championship, everybody was singing their praises and saying, oh my God, look what's going on here. Now, they didn't have the quarterback. And I think that's kind of what happened with the Jags last year. I say all that to say I have 5 obstacles that are the most in the way of the Texans taking that next step and having tangible success that a lot of people crave when it comes to taking the next step. Number 1 is the Jags. The Jags last year were a meltdown away from winning the division. They wet the bed at the end of the season. And had the Jags won one more game, we'd be talking about them as division champs, and we'd be talking about the Texans having a first-round game against Buffalo. Again, does that make you feel worse about the Texans? Perhaps not, but I don't think I want to just completely dismiss the Jaguars when it comes to potentially winning the AFC South. I do think there's a gray area there that needs to at least be acknowledged when it comes to the Texans' biggest obstacle. Now, that's in the short term. In the long term, I will say this about the Jags. The notion that they're going to build some sort of powerhouse and it's going to be sustainable, I think should be questioned, because 3 years into Trevor Lawrence, he doesn't suck, but you also don't think that he's elite. And furthermore, I would say that Trevor Lawrence is closer to the bottom second tier guys than he is getting up to the top tier. You can make a strong case, I think a very valid case, that based on what we've seen, CJ Stroud is closer to getting to the Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson type of range than Trevor Lawrence is. That's not to say Trevor Lawrence is a bad quarterback, but let's put it this way, if how we feel about CJ Stroud right now, if we feel about him like anyone that's not looking at it through Jags goggles feels about Trevor Lawrence, I think we would be a little bit less optimistic than we are right now. Can all change. But in the short term, when it comes to obstacles of the Texans taking that next tangible step the next year, I think that obstacle one would be the Jags because they were so close last year. So that would be obstacle one, the Jags, no doubt. And we'll see how that goes. I think this is a good comparison. Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott. I don't even think he's on that level yet, to be honest with you. I think if Trevor Lawrence gets to Dak Prescott level, then I think that he's taken a major step forward. Dak Prescott's been in MVP discussion. Say what you want. I think he was second last year in MVP discussion. Now, he came up short in the playoffs, and I know it's a polarizing thing, but I actually think that's disrespectful to Dak Prescott. I get what you're saying, though. Where you're not going to, you can't reach the ultimate ceiling, and it's kind of a tease, but I don't think Trevor Lawrence is close to Dak Prescott at this point. But I do get what you're saying. I think Dak is a lot better. So the number one would be the Jags. Obstacle number one. Obstacle number two is the Colts. And I think the Colts are getting slept on. And I know that the Texans beat the Colts at the end of the season. They had a depleted secondary. They were playing with Gardner Minshew, although I don't know how much better Anthony Richardson is. But I think of all the teams that are getting the most disrespected for what they did last year, I think the job that Shane Steichen did is not getting enough credit. I don't even think he was top 5 in Coach of the Year voting, which to me is a joke. I think that's a disgrace. I think that's a joke. Pains me to say, I don't like giving the Colts love, but that's a joke. And I think a lot of times, I remember when I was early in my career, there was an OG radio host, and he was saying that Peyton Manning looked like the MVP the year he got hurt because the Colts became the worst team in the league. And you look at what happened to Philadelphia's offense. They started out hot, but it wasn't quite the same. I think they missed Shane Steichen this year. And I think Shane Steichen did an excellent job with the Indianapolis Colts. I don't think they get enough respect. Furthermore, just like the Jags, if the Colts catch that pass on fourth down, then they end the Texans season, and maybe we're having a different conversation. So I'm not sleeping on the Colts. I'm not sleeping on the Jags when it comes to competing for a division title this year. I do think we need to at least acknowledge that. If we are looking for stuff to push back, again, go back. If you're just tuning in, appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. But if you're just tuning in, this whole discussion is escalated off of Kyle Brandt and Peter Schrager saying they don't know how to have any concerns about the Texans. So obstacle 2 would be the Colts. Number 1, the Jags. Number 2, the Colts. Biggest obstacle number 3, and you're going to have to hear me out on this, and this is connected to the Colts. The Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson combination. I don't think I'm not as high on Anthony Richardson as some are. I also thought that Bryce Young was him. So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm not patting myself on the back, but I did not think that Anthony Richardson's inability to stay healthy was getting enough attention heading into the draft last year. I brought up the knee surgery, the hamstring. He hurt himself dancing and had to miss a game. And the concussion. And few games into his NFL career, that's the biggest question right now is, can he stay healthy? And can he be consistent? But I've already said what I think about Shane Steichen. I think Shane Steichen's a really good coach. And this is why for this year, in the short term, I kind of think that Anthony Richardson is more dangerous this year than he had been had he remained healthy all last year. Because I think quarterbacks a lot of times, like Anthony Richardson, who might have accuracy limitations, who might require a special system to maximize his skills, a lot of times the longer that you see him, the more you can kind of catch on to it. It's the same reason why eventually the Lamar Jackson, Greg Roman thing didn't work out. became a little bit predictable. And I'm not saying that Shane Steichen is Greg Roman. I'm just saying a lot of times you do what you can do with the quarterback. And the more time that you have to look at it, the more time you can figure it out. We didn't get a big look at Anthony Richardson last year. So Anthony Richardson, I see the RG3 comparison. I don't know if you can compare it to RG3, but I do think that on top of the injuries, the league kind of figured out, how Kyle Shanahan was going to use RG3. Or Mike Shanahan, freaking Gruden's brother. So I do think that the fact that Richardson missed some time, and again, that might be a normal thing, but I do think that kind of, in a strange way, benefits the Colts next year. So that's obstacle 3. See, we might be kind of grasping for straws. The Good Morning Football guys might have been right. Maybe there's not a lot of pushback for the Texans taking the next step. RG3 was screwed by Shanahan. I don't agree with that. I know that's his narrative now, and he probably shouldn't have played. He screwed himself. He started feeling himself. He was in love with the owner. He shouldn't have gone back in. He could have made that decision himself. And I know he likes to push all the stuff out there. I'm not going to blame the Shanahans for screwing up RG3. I think a case can be made. He never would have done what he did in the first place had it not been for the Shanahans. So yeah, I'm not gonna go there. I don't agree with that. I know that's kind of the narrative. They weren't great, but he didn't have to do what he did. He didn't have to go out there. I think they made him. It might have been fool's gold early on with RG3. Obstacle number 5 is going to be the usual. I think that the fact that the Texans are in the NFL, and the NFL is a year-to-year league. I think that the Texans, and I'll go back to 4. I think that the fact that the Texans are in the NFL and it's a year-to-year league it's obvious. Sometimes stuff is out of your control. There's injuries. There's teams taking the next step. There's, drop passes, all that type of stuff. It's the NFL. So nothing is promised. So that's obstacle 5. Going back to obstacle 4, I've talked about this a lot. The weapons, offensive weapons. I think the Texans need to address that. They seem to agree, but the weapons is obstacle 4. So 1, the Jags, 1 win away from winning the division. 2, the Colts, a drop pass away from ending the Texans season. 3, Richardson sitting out along with Shane Steichen. 4, the offensive weapons. And 5, the obvious when it comes to the NFL. What do you think the biggest obstacles are for the Texans? I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit more difficult to lay out than it probably should be. So Kyle Brandt, Good Morning Football, might be onto something. The Texans are in really good shape. I think we all agree they're a really good draft away from perhaps making some noise. Hit the like button, listen to L Long, and I'll get to a few of the other comments. Siraj says, I still don't understand why Nick traded out of the first round for a second round pick next year. We'll see if it works out. If they stay put, then I think it makes sense. If they trade back in, maybe raise the eyebrows a little bit. They've said, they being Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, they've said that they like that range of player. And perhaps they can add 3 impact guys instead of 2. And then next year you have another second round pick. It's that 2-year window. In the short term, yeah, you'd love to be sitting at 23 and potentially be able to add some of those guys. But in the short and long term, if you want to combine it, you have 2 second round picks next year. You have 2 second round picks this year. There's always potential major impact players in that second round. So if they can hit on those 3 picks, then it can have an impact. And next year you'll be able to keep it going. So we'll see how it goes. The trade back into the first doesn't seem like it would make sense. Have I heard anything about tonsil surgery? I have not. From what I heard, and I hate this term because it's easy for my ass to say. I've heard it was a minor surgery for whatever the hell that is. But yeah, who knows? Tyler says, I agree with you, Landry, today. But when Dak was up for his contract, he'd accomplished about as much as Trevor has going into his second contract. Dak had more consistency with team and coach. Yeah, and the other thing I'll say for Dak is he went into a way better situation than Trevor Lawrence did. If I am being fair to Trevor, the Cowboys were kind of one of those fool's gold top 5 picks. Tony Romo had gotten hurt the year before. They actually took Zeke Elliott in the first round. They had actually a pretty decent roster. They'd already built an offensive line for Romo, and then Romo got hurt, and Dak just kind of took over. So, and Trevor went and played for Urban Meyer. So, I'll be fair to him there. I still don't think he's in Dak Prescott's class just yet, but I agree with what you're saying. My point on the Trevor Lawrence thing, as much as anything, is if we feel about CJ Stroud like the Jags feel about Trevor Lawrence in 3 years, that sucks. I mean, that sucks because, I mean, again, not trash, but elite, tough as hell. Give him a lot of credit for being as tough as he was last year. But elite, don't know about all that. Johnny, there is an element to him sitting back for a season. I agree with you, Landry. I'm assuming you're talking about Anthony Richardson. Louis T says, riddle me this. What are we riddling, sir? No idea what that is. Vikings going to be trash next season. Is this like the reason to trade for the pick? I've never liked that. I remember when Jack Easterby's dumbass, we were at Armadillo Palace, and they'd made the DeAndre Hopkins trade. And remember how they had that random ass pick swap in that trade? I think that's an underrated element of stupidity when it came to that trade. But Easterby told me, he was like, yeah, and Arizona's going to be bad, and we're pick swapping with them. I was like, pick swap? Like, you couldn't have just gotten the pick there. Same thing with the Texans last year and the Browns. I think when you start assuming stuff like that, I don't. A second round pick's a second round pick. I'm good with the second round pick. If you're going to have 2 seconds the next 2 years, you're going to stay put and you're going to make those picks. And even if you hit on half those picks or three of those picks or whatever, then sign me up for that. But the assumption that you're going to make a trade because you're going to forecast how bad a team is, I don't really get down with that as much as a lot of people are. The riddle is, are the Texans an offensive or a defensive team? Well, I mean, I mean, they I guess they're kind of balanced, but CJ is definitely the straw that stirs the drink. So he's going to be the guy that gets it done. But I mean, I go back to the Baltimore game because the defense gets some criticism, and I don't want to have like a straw man and say it's the majority of the criticism, but they wore down in the second half. But the reality is, you only had 7 points in the first half, and you didn't score a touchdown on offense. So had the offense performed better, and we can do this. Tank Dell was out and the offensive line and stuff, but there's no guarantees that you're going to be healthy from season to season. So I think that's a dangerous assumption to make. And Baltimore had some injuries of their own, but the Texans offense just didn't put up a good enough effort to at least give some sort of hope. And eventually they just ran out of gas and ran out of steam. They're going to have more offensive weapons if they want to be an offensive squad. But right now I would say it's pretty balanced. Jags lost a wide receiver and a cornerback one. Yeah, I mean, they lost Calvin Ridley. I think they're going to draft somebody, and I think the chances are that guy might be better for them than what Calvin Ridley was, especially when it comes to the piece of pie. And I also think that Armstead might be a better thing for them than Calvin Ridley. But we'll see how that goes. Yeah, the tackling's not bad. They swarm, but they also have to swarm because they miss a lot of tackles. So we'll see how that goes. You kind of put me on the spot there, Louie, which is what I like. But yeah, offensive or defensive squad, that's a hell of a question. They're definitely going to have to add some weapons on offense. So those are, in my opinion, the hot take people can't hot take the Texans. Are they getting too much love? What do you think the Texans' biggest obstacles are? Be sure to put that in the comments, subscribe, like, right along. Texans get Danielle Hunter despite offering less money per ESPN, and the Texans avoiding hot takes. Shout out to the Rockets for the 10th straight win. Got Oklahoma City on the back-to-back. No Alexander. And 10 straight dubs is 10 straight dubs. I've got to apologize for that. They're a game back of the dubs. Speaking of the dubs, and Jalen Green's balling his ass off, playing some of the best basketball. Astros open the season tomorrow. Joe Espada. I actually think Joe Espada is under a lot of pressure. We've seen 2 immediate culture changes here in Houston with D'Amico and Udoka. And obviously there was nowhere to go but up with those 2 guys, but it's been immediate. I'm not saying the Astros or arrow is pointing down, because when you've made 7 straight ALCSs, until proven that that's the case, there's a thing. But the thing about Espada is Espada could win a division, have a good season with less talent perhaps than Hinch and AJ had, and almost be looked at as disappointing. So I think when we look at Espada and we look at what he's doing with the Astros, I do think that it's fair. You can do whatever you want, but I do think it's fair to at least like channel the expectations. But make no mistake about it, when it comes to the 3 major sports in town, when it comes to those 3 major sports, 2 guys in their first year made immediate impacts. What is Joe Espada going to do? I think the pressure kind of cranks up a little bit, and Houston sports are in a good place. And oh, by the way, up 45, you got the Cougs versus Duke. So we got a hell of a next couple of days ahead of us. Tomorrow will be a month away from the draft. John Harris, he's going to join me for probably a couple hours. He's going to be taking all the questions and stuff like that. Might have to get the supers going with John Harris here, the super chat game. But he's going to join me for a couple of hours. But tomorrow you're going to be a month away from the draft. You're going to be a day away from Cougs versus Duke, up 45 in the state. And the Astros, the old H-Town Whoopie, the thing that you can rely on for the longest time, they're going to be in action. So it's going to be fun. Texans right near the top when it comes to the optimism. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. In the Loop tomorrow, live from Tom's Watch Bar. Come by, say hi from 10 to 2 if you so choose. I think I'm going to get J-Lo, John Lopez smashed. Appreciate you for coming through. Always remember, when it comes to this Texans stuff, we're all in it together. Have a good one.
Every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localized every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up. We number 1. You don't need to try your luck. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too.